Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson, author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solo, Encore, and Creative Entrepreneurs. And I'm your host today on this program on Solo Pro Radio. Welcome. We're glad that you've tuned in. And I would like to just tell you a little bit about Better, Smarter, Richer. Better, Smarter, Richer is a fill-in-the-blanks workbook. It is a plan. It is a study group. It is an approach, and it is a philosophy that helps solo business owners, those of you in one-person businesses, find financial success. What I know is that solo businesses are distinctly different from traditional business models. Solo businesses tell you how to build your business and your marketing and all the things that you need to do to support your business without doing what traditional businesses recommend, which is hiring employees. When you hire employees, the next thing you know, you are spending all of your time managing, overseeing, training, recruiting, et cetera, with your employees, and you don't get to do the work you really love. So on our book, Better, Smarter, Richer, we teach you how to have a very successful solo business and not follow that traditional business path. Hope you'll tune into the website, bettersmarterricher.com, sign up for our newsletter, join the conversation. We have a lively conversation on the blog. I hope you'll take a look. We also have a free ebook you can download with outlining the 7 principles for success as a solo. So I hope you'll do that. So anyway, today we have another guest who is got a great story to tell. 5 years ago, Jim Logan of Soul Ventures decided to embark on a career transition. He knew that the ordained ministry, which had been his life for more than 2 decades, was no longer a good fit, and he took all the right steps. He thought hard, he formally assessed his skills and preferences, and he went to a career counselor who helped him identify his niche, but it did not work. He was not pursuing his passion. Since he has begun pursuing his passion, he has created a business, Soul Ventures, that provides person-centered spiritual consultation and ceremonies. And today we are going to hear from Jim about his journey. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. I think you have a wonderful story to tell. And I want you to know that in our Better, Smarter, Richer study group right now, we have a person who is making a massive career change, and it's almost your same story. He got lots of advice on what he ought to do, and we are at Better, Smarter, Richer. We're talking to him about following your passion and how important that is, and he keeps saying, this is the right thing. This is the right thing. I'm doing what I'm meant to do. So I hope he's tuned in today. So, Jim, tell your story to our listeners, like, who you are, where you grew up, where you went to school, what you studied, and what led you into the ordained ministry in the first place.
All right. Well, I grew up in Bend. I'm Central Oregon native, and both parents native Central Oregonians as well. And I somewhere along the way, it picked up the expression that I'm educated well beyond my capacity. I spent 22 years altogether in Catholic schools, and along with that, there was a 2-year stint in my junior high years where I was going half-time Catholic school, half-time public school. But so in Bend, I grew up with the Holy Name Sisters, who are based out of Merrillhurst here locally, and also with Capuchins, who are Franciscan order. I had the opportunity to enter seminary as a freshman in high school at Mount Angel. My first visit there in 8th grade, I just felt very much at home and affirmed for who I was there, and had experienced a rather significant spiritual experience at that time. And so I began seminary as a high school freshman and became what became known as a lifer, with 12 years in seminary education before I was ordained. So at Mount Angel, I did my high school and college years. I had studied philosophy and liberal arts, and with a focus on religious studies. And what I got out of that education was a very broad view about just the human soul and what how incredibly wonderful and complex people are. And the religious studies looked included a comparative religions approach where the cardinal rule was you never study somebody else's faith or tradition through the filter of your own terms, but really learn to enter into the vocabulary and the experience of other people, suspending your own framework and biases for a while to really get to know what their experience is about. What I also gained at Mount Angel was very much this sense of connecting what is deeply spiritual to, bringing a prayerful presence to, the formal, organized kind of worship experiences.
Sounds like a great education.
Oh, it really was. I mean, there were 60 course hours that were devoted to the history of Western civilization and taking a multidisciplinary view of, so we would, for any particular location and period in history, we would take a look at it from the perspective of what's the history, what are the arts and sciences of the time, what's the operative philosophy and theology going on. And so it was a very rich education in, kind of what makes us tick, not only as Americans, but kind of, again, getting a more global view of humanity around the globe.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's just fabulous.
Yeah.
Wow.
And from there, then, I went on to a wonderful education in Rome where, sort of all the liberal arts became so much, that course of studies became so much alive, being able to experience, a place like Rome where you sort of confronted with more than 2,000 years of history present and visible there, as well as kind of getting a sense for, what the church looks like around the globe and how incredibly diverse it is, depending on where, either within our own country here, as well as what church might look like around the world as well. So I did 4 years that included just sort of the general course of theology that was standard for seminary, and 1 year of specializing in liturgy and sacraments, which basically is a study on how to connect life experience and your theoretical framework to a ceremonial experience that brings the realities of what people are celebrating or struggling with to kind of bring those alive and bring a certain experience of grace and connection and meaning to those moments.
You know what I love about this story, Jim, is that you got it on such a deep level. I'm not sure everybody else who would study liturgy and sacraments really understood that what they were learning is how to connect life experiences to ceremony. That's impressive.
Yes, well, and that was, I really credit the Benedictines with that, because when I got to Rome, at the seminary there where we had people from all across, at the place where I lived, it was all Americans, but, and the comment there was always, you could tell who came out of the Benedictine seminaries because of that connection between, sort of this authentic, felt experience from within being translated into, sort of a group experience as well.
Wow.
As opposed to
how rich.
The Jesuits, who I have also studied with, and I got a lot of my training in spirituality from them, but there was sort of a running joke that when it came to liturgy and ceremony, that for the Jesuits, if nobody got hurt, it was a good liturgical experience. So
oh my goodness!
And so they had kind of realized that liturgy and ceremony wasn't their forte, but certainly they have what their forte is, and what I was able to capture by way of spiritual directors in seminary and with additional studies after ordination was theirs is a spirituality that begins and remains rooted in one's personal experience and tapping into coming, to basically exploring the desires of your heart as a primary place to encounter God. So it is this deeply interior experience that that can surprise people, especially in the Catholic tradition, where sometimes it feels as if there's so much that's imposed from the outside. But the Jesuit approach is very much to capture it from the inner experience.
Wow. You had a fabulous education. So once you were, formally ordained, what kind of work did you do?
Initially, basically lived the life of a parish priest out in rural central and eastern Oregon. And what I discovered along the way is that, especially in the rural settings, the parish priest becomes the jack of all trades. That, I did the typical work that people would expect of life as a priest, weekly worship with the community, the preaching, teaching adult education classes, developing other spiritual enrichment programs, supervising the education programs for kids, providing counsel and advice for people, celebrating all the different life experiences that people do, weddings, funerals, baptisms, both of infants as they're welcomed into families, as well as people on their own spiritual journey coming into the church. So I did all of that work, but then a lot of the administrative and business kinds of work. I mean, just having to deal with insurance, taxes, salaries, organizing, volunteers and staff.
That grounds you pretty quickly.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All the financial management and, being able to put together effective boards who, become sort of the, provide a certain amount of supervision and experience within the community to kind of, make sure that the living connections are happening that are needed. And, sometimes having to be the person who jumps out on the snow plow to get the sidewalks and parking lot plowed out, or, mow the lawn as it's needed, and, some of that very practical kinds of stuff, too.
Wow. They say that's very grounding.
Yes, it is. It is. And, what I learned out of the experience, the lovely thing with the rural work is you're in small communities, and, kind of the frightening thing at times is everybody knows your business. But
yes.
But at the same time, there was always a very clear challenge to be authentic and to be real. That anything that smacks of any kind of phoniness or disconnected from what's real to people's lives, you get called on that pretty quickly. And
I'll bet.
That was grounding, but also being immersed in the lives of people who whose lives are governed by Mother Nature herself. The ranchers, the foresters, people whose living and life experience very much runs on the cycles of nature. That was just good and healthy and grounding for me.
Wow, what a thing to juxtapose in your life, that you've been in years of all this fabulous study of history and culture and human development, through time, and then you get into a rural community where you say people are ruled by nature. You have to be grounded. You have to be very practical, and you had to take all of that and bring it into talking about how you were being applicable in somebody's life. Yes. When they had a big issue, like an unhappy child, or a sick parent, or a loss of a job, or all of those things that go on in real life. Wow.
Yes, definitely. And then, so after 12 years of that experience, then there was a turning point in terms of further education and developing even further in terms of what my work took me. So my bishop had asked me to study canon law, which is it's basically the church's equivalent of a course in studies of both law and business administration.
Oh, wow.
And so, and I was willing to, because I was looking for an opportunity for further education, and this was going to kind of be the one and only opportunity. But it also fell outside of my passion significantly. Mm-hmm. So I did a little, dialogue with the bishop and said, if I did that course of studies, during the school year, would you support my going into a program of studies in spirituality? At the same time for summer school. And so he was willing to do that. So that gave me an avenue to sort of pursue my passion as well. And I went into that course of studies thinking, okay, this is probably going to feel like, this almost, if not contradictory, just sort of the difference of day and night between sort of the practical realities of law and governance and rules and regulation versus spirituality. But my delightful surprise was the two programs worked very well together.
Oh, wow!
So I started at Creighton University in Omaha. It's a Jesuit university, and they have this wonderful program in Christian spirituality. And what the theme of the program was basically to say we're drawing all the wisdom we can out of the very deep spiritual tradition of the church and of the Jesuit spirituality, but we want to make sure that we make it practical and accessible to the everyday person.
Wow.
And so it was very much, this sense of what I had experienced previously from the Jesuits of, let's make sure that this is, a living spirituality deeply connected to people's own personal experience. And then
That's wonderful. Go ahead.
Yeah. And by the end of that first summer, the first of 3 summers with them, then went on to Washington, D.C. at Catholic U, where I was engaged in the canon law studies. And on the first day of classes, what they had to say was, you need to think about this course of studies as a study in applied spirituality. That basically canon law is about taking all of the theology and theory of the church and making sure that it's put into effective practice in terms of how relationships are structured and organized within the church, and the organizing that needs to happens in accord with what we say we believe in.
Right.
And so it was delightful from the get-go to have that sense of, okay, if spirituality is the operative term within the canon law studies, then I think I'm going to be able to not only maintain my bearings, but really find some passion around that as well. And what emerged out of that too, I quickly figured out that I was going to have to find some theme that would be a consistent tie to the research and writing I would need to be doing as part of the course development there. And the burning question, 1998 is when I went into this course of studies, so one of the new realities in Oregon at the time was the establishment of physician-assisted suicide, something that the church had opposed passionately. But the burning question really came out of that was people have so much fear of loss of control, loss of independence, being overwhelmed by pain in the dying process. And so, regardless of which side of the controversy people were in around that, there was the burning question of let's just make sure that people have adequate help and support and a sense of comfort and perspective in the midst of what they might experience in dying. So the care of those who are dying and people's experience around death and grief really became the focus in both, of kind of my specialization in both subjects, to be able to, again, try to bring back something very practical to the present day needs. That
is really powerful stuff that you've been doing. Wow. That's amazing. Yes. I had forgotten that was going on in 1998 in Oregon, but it certainly was. And I could see that would be quite a theme for you to be able to pull together your study of spirituality and canon law, and would make you a very deep thinking and effective person to deal with ceremonies and, the transition, the passing, from this life to whatever we're going to on the other side, because you would have a high degree of awareness of it.
Yes, I mean, I guess part of what I really liked about the studies was being able to, draw connections between all the wisdom that Dr. Kubler-Ross had developed around, people's typical experience in death and dying, and to look at what's laid out in the church's rituals and realize that, it wasn't like it was this taxing exercise to draw the connections, because but there was also that need to be more intentional about how to then draw out of the ceremonies, the connections for what people are really experiencing there. So,
wow.
And all of that became, good prep work for what sort of became the curveball thrown at me is then because once I concluded studies, I came back home, and on a part-time basis, I continued to do the parish work, but my full-time work became helping the bishop in the administration of the region, which was 66,000 square miles of eastern and central Oregon. So you've got far-flung miles where people are kind of scattered sparsely throughout. But so the work, the focus of my work at that point became, being a consultant and supervisor to clergy and parish staff throughout the region to help shape and refine policy, and then the sort of the explosive world that I was not expecting or prepared for was that was the beginning of the avalanche of lawsuits that would come out of the sex abuse crisis within the church. And so that took up quite a bit of time and energy. I had to kind of bring my canon law expertise in to help our attorneys in responding to the lawsuits, as well as then it fell to me to implement the child safety programs within the diocese and say, you have to drastically change how we do things to pay attention, to be alert, and to watch out for the welfare of children. And
so you were really indispensable with this.
Very much so. And I really went at it with, from this perspective that, the church had been such a rich and wonderful place for me that I wanted to make sure it was that kind of place for our own folks as well on a consistent basis.
Sure, of course you did. Wow. So how did you decide that the formal ministry was no longer for you?
What ended up happening, and this started to unfold almost exactly 5 years ago now, and what happened was that between the kind of juggling all the various duties that I had, as well as so much energy into the child safety stuff, that all of a sudden there was just sort of a process within myself that said, I've invested so much time and energy in taking care of everybody else's needs, but ignoring my own. Mm-hmm. And some of my own needs that were being ignored finally just reared up and said, enough, we need to readjust how we're doing life here. Uh-huh. And what really emerged out of that was having to get in touch with, along with the wonderful things I'd experienced in the church, I had also experienced trauma of sexual abuse and exploitation towards myself. And so, it just sort of all of a sudden that just came up and said, let's just take a pause here and re-examine everything.
Right.
So, as I worked through, there was about a 6-month crisis and not sure what to do, but, what started to unfold as I explored that in counseling was basically a plan, and the smart thing to do would be to take a year off as a sabbatical to just take time to work on myself. I got some really good counseling and, and opportunities for spiritual development during that year too. And then by the end of the year, had realized that, that what I was going to need was a lot more freedom than what some of the institutional restraints, and expectations would be on me as clergy. That some of my needs in life to be able to socialize more freely and openly, and and to kind of get in a space that was free from where some of the trauma was for me, that I just needed to move on from the institutional life within the church.
Right.
So at that point, I submitted my resignation and said, and in taking the time to think things out, just thought, well, Portland will be the best place for me to come. Figured there would be more economic opportunity here. I had family here to be able to lean on and rely on too, as I got my bearings and tried to figure things out.
Goodness, that's a big step. So you must have just felt totally at loose ends, and this had been your anchor for, as you said, basically since you were 12 years old. So, the majority of your life.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
The big fear was whether I could maintain some of the friendships and relationships I had, or if I was going to have to cut ties altogether and just sort of forge this brand new life with no connection to the past.
Yeah.
And, and what's unfolded beautifully, I think, is, being able to remove myself totally from, the situation where I worked and lived, but to be able to maintain friendly ties with relatives and friends.
That's great.
Back in a home area. So the continuity that I was afraid would be disrupted has been maintained. But then there was also just the need to come to Portland, and my first priority really became, establishing the local support I would need. So I basically started immersing myself with local 12-step community to be able to get meetings and ongoing help for what I was going to need. And what I love about the 12-step communities, too, is that, there is such a deep focus on spirituality, but with no strings attached, no expectations what that spirituality needs to be or look like.
Yahoo!
Just to find, your own sense of grounding on your own terms, and so again, it resonates so well with with what the Jesuit spirituality had brought to me that was helpful. And from there, one of my needs was to be able to engage better with the local LGBT community, so to explore various social activities within the gay community. Very quickly went to a concert of the Gay Men's Chorus and decided on the spot I was going to need to sign up and sing with these folks. So,
oh, how fabulous! So
yeah, and once again, this month marks 3 years since I started singing with Portland Gay.
Oh, how great!
Chorus.
That's there's a whole metaphor there about finding your voice, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, there is. And what was wonderful was that in finding my voice, I could, what we voiced, within the music that we do so consistently is very much what people's stories and experience are, and what the hungers of their heart are. And so,
yes.
And again, I thought I was going to be jumping into a world that was just totally strange and different from what I had experienced. But one of the big surprises was to find out that in Portland Gay Men's Chorus, the single largest professional circle represented there are those of current and former clergy.
Oh my goodness!
The largest professional group within the chorus. It's like, kindred spirits are to be found wherever you go.
Isn't that wonderful?
Wonderful.
And who'd have known?
Yes, I mean it came as a total shock and surprise to me, but
pleasant surprise, I would think.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So, good for you, and it seems to me you've really landed on your feet. But let's talk about your career.
Yes.
For me, who's so career and economics oriented, that would be a big fear. Certainly you were supported by your church career, and then you have to think, now what am I going to do? So, how did you go about finding your post ministry career?
I leaned on all kinds of people. I mean, initially, as I talked to people about, okay, how do I take my church experience and translate that something into the business world?
Right.
There was very much the sense that the education and skills I had around administrative work was, that I had a lot to offer in that regard. But it was also an extremely tight job market when I got here. So I moved here in November. It would take till September before I got hired on for some contract work with the state, and that became doing outreach and marketing on a public health campaign. And so I was definitely grateful for the work, and the initial job search process also got disrupted by a cancer diagnosis. So in June, my first year here, I had surgery to deal with prostate cancer, and so that was just yet another one of those curveballs to have to deal with. But
boy, the gods were making sure they had your attention, weren't they?
Absolutely.
Okay, Jim, are you paying attention now?
I know. Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that wants my interview time with God to say, "What were you thinking?" But of course, there's always the prospect of that question coming right back at me on all kinds of other things. So I may have to be careful on that question. But yeah, so I was able to take on the contract work and did that for a while, and then was back on the job search again. And what I began to experience was that and some of the wisdom that I gathered out of my networking prior to this job and afterwards was a sense of first of all, you're going to have a very strong sense of what it is you want to do.
Yes.
And along the way, I especially got some great pointers from former clergy who, if they looked at my resume, they say, what the resume says is that you did a really good job as a priest, but, but there's nobody. But you're not looking, but you're not looking to do that work. So people want to know how to hire you for what for the skills that they need. So So it did take a lot of work to start translating the terminology from the official job titles I had to try to figure out job titles that made sense in within that world. And eventually, I did take some steps just to do some career counseling. So a friend of mine had put me onto a path to do some aptitude testing that would be very much about, okay, let's find out what the natural abilities are and what careers best match up with that. And from there, then I had the good fortune by way, and always by way of networking is where names surface. So I was introduced to Bruce Hazen, who runs 3 Questions Consulting, and basically did career counseling with him. And so as we sort of took the results of the aptitude testing as well as, and I kind of knew I had passion around education. I had been involved significantly with healthcare as well, between my hands-on work with people who are sick or dying. I also, in my administrative experience out of Bend, had been a consultant to bioethics committees and to the mission-focused committee for Catholic healthcare, and so had been immersed in that. So I was at a point of saying I like both the world of academia and the world of healthcare, and so at some point in the processing with Bruce, then the suggestion was, well, there is a healthcare education institution here in Portland of great significance, OHSU. So why not look for and so it's sort of like, oh, what a lovely thing where I don't have to make an either or choice on that. So was then engaged with the process of trying to figure out, okay, where's the niche that I could come into. And so in doing some research and developing a desirable niche, then beginning to network, I what I've suffered from was what felt like a lot of ADD of just sort of not being able to just kind of keep focus and track. And so one of my very trusted advisors in the work I'd done on my sabbatical happened to be in town as all that's going on. So I made my complaint about how hard it is to stay focused. And she just looked at me and said, "You're not focused because you are not pursuing your passion." And as soon as she said that, it's like,
bless that woman.
What became very clear to me instantly was, my long-term goal really was to say that doing spiritual work with people is where my passion really lies. And I knew that door was shut with regard to the church, but I had also seen the possibilities of what I'd been educated in, and knowing that, especially here in the Northwest, Oregon and Washington, the stats have always suggested that we're 2/3 unchurched. People just don't have the formal religious affiliations, but in just again, engaging with people in the gay community, engaging with people in the 12-step communities.
Right.
It's obvious that with or without religious ties, people are still very much on a spiritual quest. So I thought, to be able to, that I had things I could bring, kind of strip of institutional ties, that there would still be a valuable service to offer. But my operative fear was that basically I needed to make money now in order to then transition into doing that work that would carry me into retirement later on. And but when Judy challenged me as she did, that's when I began to realize, and she basically said, do what you love, the money will follow. So that's when I said, okay,
that's still true.
Then it's time to take what I sort of dreamed of, slowly launching in a few years, that to go ahead and just take the plunge and launch it now and see where we can go.
Yeah, do it now.
Yes. Yeah.
Just go straight to it. Do it now.
Yes.
And you have begun doing that.
I have indeed. So
and is it working?
It's working wonderfully well. In my initial marketing, I always had this fear of, I tend to have big dreams and vision, and sometimes the practicality of implementing is what can scare me. And so there's part of me that was hesitant in some of my initial marketing to say, okay, I know what it is I want to do, but I was unsure if I could really pull it off as I wish. But as I've gained experience, especially with weddings and funerals I have done so far, I'm getting the sense of, that I am able to deliver what I'm promising, which is within the ceremonial work to make sure that these are person-centered. And, my operative rules are very much that, if there's a governing spirituality to a ceremony I do, it's not mine and it's not any single tradition, but it is whatever is true and fits right with the spirit of the person that I'm working with and serving.
Well, I'm totally convinced that people love to be taken to a deeper level and that they love to talk about meaning. And, when you are an authority figure, as you are by being a spiritual counselor, that you are automatically given permission by the person who comes to you to move the conversation to a deeper level. It's totally up to you. You can leave it at a superficial level, or you can move it to a deeper level, and people are so grateful because they are starving for conversation and guidance and interaction that has meaning to them. And, it's like the desert flowers blooming when you talk on that level. And, my experience has been that people respond immediately. Just immediately when you do that. Have you found that?
Yes, I have very much found that. The majority of my work so far has been dealing with people at the time of the wedding and funeral, which are just natural life events that plunges you into the depths of what life is about to begin with.
Right.
And so yes, in those cases, I have found people, instantly open and. And they're they are able to be so articulate about what's meaningful for them, what is not meaningful for them, what their life story is about, and how they want to portray that in in the ceremony that we customize and fashion for their special moment, whether that's bidding farewell to a loved one, or if it's making that big leap of commitment to a partner that they want to commit to for life.
And you're perfect for this work, Jim, because I'm thinking, all that education that you have, and then the combined with your own journey, the steps of your own journey, and the pain of leaving that path behind, and coming to accept yourself and what you really wanted to do, I think would give you tremendous empathy for people, and they would feel very safe working with you, and they would feel that they can speak with you about things that are deeply important to them, and know that they would find understanding and acceptance from you. I would think that would happen, and automatically. And
thank you for that confidence. That certainly is what I strive to do, because my attitude is that one of the things that's needed for spiritual development and for conversation around one's spirituality is a sense of being safe in that conversation, a sense of being affirmed for who people are, a sense of being able to be free enough to say what they need to say and express about what's in the depth of their heart without shame or recrimination.
Yes.
And, I feel like that's the space that I try to maintain within myself, and I guess I've been taught by enough mentors of how to create that space for myself, and would love to engage with people in learning to create that space for themselves as well.
And that you move them there. You move them in that conversation there, and they're happy to be there, and they feel comfortable being in that. And I know when we
somewhat, although I guess I would say that there's a certain caution I would apply there in terms of saying that I'm moving there. I guess on my part I see it to create the invitation and open the questions that allow for that. But I'm very sensitive that it can't be a manipulative kind of thing either. So there's part of me that says there is a sense of I'm not the one in charge in the spiritual conversation.
Although when people say something, one of the things I've learned is when people make a statement or an inquiry to you, there are probably 20 different ways that you could answer it. And, your choice of how to answer lets them know of what kind of conversation you're willing to have and, eager to have and open to have, and that's the invitation.
Okay, yes.
By doing that. And, if they then, in the game of conversation, then they have the right to refuse to go there or not want to go there or be reluctant to go there, and that's just fine too. You don't manipulate or force, but you're saying, we can do this if you want.
Yes, absolutely. Because, in the training I had as a spiritual director, and in creating the work I would do as Soul Ventures, I decided I wanted to abandon the term of spiritual director, and so decided spiritual consultation made more sense to kind of take a little bit of that charge out of it.
Yes.
Although the reality was, what I learned at Creighton was that although there's this long tradition of talking about spiritual direction, they said from the get-go, that not to imply that you're in charge of the direction, but ultimately, you're there to listen in on people's inner conversation as they engage with how they envision the transcendent realities of their life, if they would call that God, or the rhythms of the universe, the rhythms of nature, where they find that grounding. My role would be one of listening in on that inner conversation and coaching the development of that conversation to become more intentional.
Great, I love it, and you have great words for it. I met you because you participated in one of my Better, Smarter, Richer study groups. Did that help you with this new career choice? And
yes, it did.
Get going?
Yes, it did. Because I'll tell you what led to my finding you was that in my work with Bruce Hazen, at one point, as we're getting on the practicalities of getting business license for, Portland and Multnomah County, I stumbled onto a regulatory question of, okay, so if I expand, if I go beyond the borders of Multnomah County, what does that mean in terms of business licenses and such? So Bruce said, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think you're going to find it with the Small Business Development Commission.
Okay.
And so that put me on the path of getting into the SBDC, and so when I went to the orientation, kind of said, this is where I am, this is, how far I'm in the development of my business plan, and they said, what you need is Jackie's Better, Smarter, Richer program, and so that basically opened up the path to meet you, and the delightful thing was that ultimately. I never got around to posing that regulatory question to you, but in the midst of your course, I got the answer to it, and that was your sense of avoiding mission creep and not getting spread too far out, and to develop a deep niche. And so, so the answer basically came to me that, basically I don't need to try to capture a huge territory that I'm serving in order to, to be able to make a go of the business. So, so I would say, one of the key lessons I learned from you was to stay focused and, again, kind of trust the path and trust that if I've got my specialization, that there will be sufficient opportunities to develop making my living with it.
So tell us, great, that pleases me. That's the part of the intent of the whole program. So tell us about Soul Ventures. I mean, what kind of work do you do, and who are you finding your clients are? I mean, who contacts you for spiritual guidance and consultation?
Well, so my work with Soul Ventures. My first and primary focus is providing spiritual consultation, and I feel like I'm poised for a wide variety of people who would want to do focus and intentional spiritual work and spiritual development for themselves. Those who are engaged within their own religious tradition, if they're wanting just to be intentional about going a little deeper with that, or if they're trying to reconcile certain aspects of their life that they don't know whether it fits within the tradition that they're trying to live out of. The consultation would, as it's one of kind of getting into the desires of one's heart and always testing to see what fits in a way that brings joy, that brings calmness, that brings peace and grounding. I mean, that's basically the if there's sort of a baseline test for if somebody's on track or out of focus spiritually. I think that's the fundamental baseline to get to. So, in spiritual consultation, some of the conversation early on is about how have you experienced those, or where do you think you can look to find, that sense of joy and purpose and calmness and grounding. And so if people are just wanting to deepen what their own religious tradition is bringing to them, I have a lot to offer in that regard. For people who have felt alienated because they don't quite fit into some of the categories of experience or expectations that some traditions would seem to require as sort of a prerequisite, I think within the process there, again, it comes down to being able to trust your own authority and figure out what it is you desire and where you can reliably find that. So whether that becomes the testing ground to, if people are unaffiliated or disaffected from a tradition, if there's another tradition that might serve them, or if they can kind of put together the pieces within their own life of where they go for grounding. What I find with spirituality is that, my sense is people are spiritually in tune, but sometimes don't have either the sense of confidence to know that they are, or they don't have the right vocabulary for it. In a conversation in an online course I was doing recently, and we were talking about the life of contemplation and, again, how to find some of that grounding. And when it came to sort of a meditative practice, she said, I don't know anything about meditation and I just don't do it. All I know is that if I go for a walk for about an hour out in the woods, then I'm calm and I'm feeling better. And my response to that was to say, you're doing the work of contemplation in that walk. And, but there is that sense of, sometimes they just haven't quite connected the dots for themselves to realize they really are doing, what, when you talk about it, feels like, well, it's a whole different world that I don't know anything about, but they're so deeply engaged in it. So, some of the work is really about being able to make explicit what implicitly is going on for folks. The other area that I'm looking at, I've been privileged to have an initial conversation with one of the staff members at the local Q Center, is that one of the things very helpful for me early on was going through a 5-week series by Kate McGraw, who is the local spiritual director, that was basically about the experience within the LGBT communities and organized religion, and where there's been such a history of friction or shaming or sometimes outright rejection. And so, as I've engaged in the gay community for myself, I do have this sense of there's a spiritual hunger, and yet there is a distrust of anything institutional because of the prior hurts and and rejection. And so it has been a while since Kate had offered that same seminar. So I'm basically in conversation right now to develop a course that I'm hoping in the next few months we might be able to put out there within the LGBT community to
I think that's
explore
a great
spirituality.
Thing. I was going to ask you how you would expand your business, and that's a wonderful way to do it and get in front of more people. And I really think that the best way for you to, grow your business, the content is fabulous, but for you to grow it is to just get in front of more people and be who you are.
So, so I've been trying to take advantage of as much networking opportunities as I can. The follow-ups to your own course are a wonderful networking opportunity. I've made some great connections there. I have signed up with the Portland Area Business Association, PABA, which is the local LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and so the networking that's going on there is really encouraging as well.
Oh, that's great. That's a wonderful way to market. So you're also offering to officiate at ceremonies, and Is that part of your business growing as well?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. My initial experience officiating at weddings so far has been with folks in the LGBT community who wanted to take advantage of the fact they could get married in Washington State but can't yet here in Oregon. So I did a number of weddings prior to the first of the year. There was sort of the rush on to be able to secure some of their benefits for the tax year.
Right.
At this point, my sense is that an awful lot of people now are just waiting to see if within this year the doors will open either by way of referendum or the court cases that are pending. So
it seems to be growing. It seems to be people are shedding. Most people. Let's put it that way. Most people are shedding the old stereotypes and the old fears, and are saying, human beings, we've got to treat us all equally. I think it's a long time coming for that to have happened, and it seems to be slowly arriving.
Yes, slowly arriving, sorely overdue, and and the great thing is that the places like Washington State that were very instrumental in turning the tide, or some of the states back east that established gay marriage within, or established the marriage equality within their own boundaries. That the experience of gay and lesbian couples who can who basically have lived a commitment for so long to to be able to celebrate it, have it recognized, is enough experience, I think, to be able to say all of the all the fear mongering that goes on about upsetting the balance of everything if we make this radical change is the reality is that people have been living this on sometimes very quietly, but
for a long time,
and for a long time. So
so this is really a recognition of reality.
Yeah, I mean the weddings I've done initially have been fun because it really is a celebration of very well established and stable relationships, and a very different dynamic from what I was used to when I would work with engaged couples who are just still in the midst of trying to figure out their relationship and all of that as they're trying as they're getting ready to marry, and so it's that's been really engaging and rewarding.
So, Jim, I've just thoroughly enjoyed talking with you and listening to your journey and your story, and we're just about out of time. So is there one last piece of advice you'd like to share with others who might be feeling spiritually detached and in need of advice or guidance and counsel? I mean, one thing you'd like to say to them?
I think the most important thing is that, your own spirituality is an ongoing quest, and just stick with the journey. It's important to listen to what's going on inside. It's important to listen both to where pain and grief, sadness and frustration are at work because they hold such incredible wisdom, but as well as to pay attention to just what brings joy and calmness and inner peace. And, I think the other piece is to always maintain constant dialogue between, sort of where the conventional wisdom or the wisdom of various spiritual traditions lie and where the wisdom within your own heart lies as well, and to keep an ongoing dialogue happening there, as well as to just, to search out those places where you can grow spiritually, places that are safe and affirming, places where what's innate and natural to your own spirituality can be honored and affirmed. And always test the wisdom that is being spoken from outside, test it to see if it rings true with the wisdom you carry within.
Really good advice. So I know I've got listeners who would just love to contact you and learn more about you. So can you give us some contact information, how people can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on the web. My web address is soulventurespdx.com, and that's soul, SOUL, venturespdx.com. I can be reached by phone at 541-771-6707, and I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/PDX-SoulVentures. So, from the website, there's a contact form to be able to email me directly as well.
All right. Well, listeners, this has been a great conversation. I know we've all learned a lot. I think Jim is particularly articulate about spirituality and our spiritual journey, and and I've enjoyed talking with him. And I want to remind you that this is Jackie B. Peterson. I'm the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solo, Encore, and Creative Entrepreneurs. And if you are in the Portland region, our Small Business Development Center is offering a free symposium on the evening of April 16th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the SBDC Climb Center. And just contact us, and you're welcome to join us. We would love to have you there. Also, if you go onto my website, bettersmarterricher.com, you can tune into not only the radio shows and the various blog posts, but you can also check out the calendar and see a whole variety of other places where I'm going to be doing Better, Smarter, Richer work over the next few weeks. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope to hear you and be with you on the radio again a week from now. And thanks. Have a great week. Goodbye.